Hey, everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Goldeye, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. And happy July! We are in a new month dedicated to global leaders, and our sponsor this month is Viasat. And today we have with us Jerry Hancock. He is one of the leaders of Viasat that in and of himself is a global leader. So great to have you on the show, Jerry.
Thanks, Don. I really appreciate it. It's always fun doing these things with you.
Absolutely. Jerry says doing things with me because we've done a couple things this year. If you guys are following us, he may look familiar from our full crew back in February. We did a month dedicated to space, and Jerry was on that show. And if you came to our Law Tech Connect workshop, Jerry was also one of our panelists for that as well. And I believe your panel is going to stream in a couple months. So great to have you on the Dawn of Autonomy this time. And we're going to really dig deep into what you do for Viasat and what Viasat is doing out there in a global leadership role in terms of emerging technologies. So, Jerry, before we get to Viasat, let's talk a little bit about you. Can you please let those that don't know you learn a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've got kind of a varied background. I've been with Viasat for probably the past 6 years, 7 years. It's been quite an exciting journey, actually. We've done a lot with aviation safety, which has been predominantly my focus, actually for probably the past 30 years. We're now working on this new emerging market for drones and air mobility. So it's always kind of exciting when you can kind of get into a new market space and actually say, hey, we're creating something new. This is kind of pretty cool, especially from where I used to come from, right? So before that, I worked at the FAA for quite a long time. Worked in that in various different roles, which makes it kind of nice because I got to see the perspective of the regulator. Even though I didn't work in regulation, most of the stuff I worked in was really on operations and strategic planning and some of the next gen stuff. It worked out really well. It kind of gives you that different perspective. So now working on the commercial side, it makes things really exciting because you can kind of try and create a merger on both that says, okay, we want to kind of do this, but okay, we have this regulator perspective to kind of help us understand how we get things to the market. More importantly, understand how we can do this within the parameters that we think are going to be required from the regulators and things like that. So it's been quite an exciting journey. I've liked it so far. Yeah, so as you can tell, I've been very passionate about this stuff. Aviation is very close to my heart. I try and fly as much as possible for fun, and so it works out well.
Very cool. Well, so again, it's such a rich background
Mhm.
and super relevant to what we're seeing in the industry today. As you said, the regulations are kind of driving the train in some respects, and your background there, I think, is critical in helping move the industry forward. By the way, everybody, we are live, and Mark Ganung from the Nevada test site is out there, a super fan, saying good morning, Dawn and Jerry. Good morning, Mark. Great to have you. And everybody else out there, make sure you're saying hello as well or asking Jerry your questions. Because, Jerry, we're going to talk about the company now.
Mhm.
And, you and I had talked about this before. And in fact, on your Law Tech Connect panel, the whole reason why we had the Space and Spectrum panel was because, many people don't fully appreciate the impact that space and space assets has on everything we do, and in particular this industry. So tell us a little bit about Viasat, what it does and how it started.
Sure. So it's kind of an interesting and it's an interesting question. So for me, um, when I left FA, I actually started working for a company called Inmarsat. And that was it's a UK based satellite company, and it's been really great. But just as much as I thought that was great, is we're now Viasat bought us out. It's been almost a year in that acquisition, so I'm sure most people can appreciate the complexity in building two powerhouse companies in the space industry and trying to merge that into one. It's been pretty interesting, quite to say the least. Mark Damer, kind of started the company. I guess he's kind of like the Steve Jobs of Viasat, for lack of a better term. And now we have Guru, who's also part of the mix as well. But it's been a pretty interesting company. They were focused on getting satellite communications out there. A lot of their focus initially was on providing internet access to the world, which is great. Except now we've got this integration with Inmarsat, and besides having the same aspirations that Guru and Mark had about providing internet services, whether it's to maritime aviation or just in general, what we get now with the integration of Viasat is really the organization that I've been a part of, which is really focused on aviation safety services, L-band, right? So now we've taken this powerhouse of what Viasat had before, and now we're integrating a whole new business market, which is really a lot of what we're focused on for the UAV and air mobility market. Is how do we increase our market space? How do we get what we've been doing for years, right? We've been predominantly cockpit communications, safety communications for quite a long time, and it started out, I think, early on in maritime, and then we've adapted that to be for cockpit communications. Now we're taking that same aspect, combining it with a broader Viasat business and integrating these safety services as well. So it's been a challenge, but it's one of those challenges where it's a good problem to have as we grow and as we do this here, to kind of see how we can really make that market presence. And it's been a fun journey so far.
Well, you mentioned L-band, and I want to kind of walk it back for a second, Jerry, because people they've heard, I'm sure, the term spectrum, but I don't know that folks fully appreciate how it works. And when you say L-band, why is that the focus for the work that you're doing now?
Mhm.
And how is that relevant to the drone and air taxi industry as an example?
Okay, that's actually a great question. So, um, probably the best way to explain this is when people think of satellite, they think of it just one technology, and the reality is it's not. There's different spectrum that's associated with it. The best example I can give you is I don't know about you, but I'm sure you've been in Florida many times. And in Florida, one of the things you generally learn in Florida is in the afternoon, somewhere between 3 and 6 o'clock, there's these thunderstorms. Most
Oh yeah.
hotels,
By the way, I'm
yeah,
in Colorado, and it's the same deal here.
yeah, there you go. Well, I think most people, they like sunny Florida, so it's usually a good example. But most of the time, what you find is a lot of the hotels buy direct TV because it's cheap, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of for their TV services, and it's oftentimes you'll see the TV go out somewhere between 3 and 5 in the afternoon for a period of time. And the reasons why is weather, especially very dense weather, impacts the satellite communications, and it's just because of the specific spectrum that they have. L-band, the reason it's used for safety, even though it doesn't offer the same broadband capabilities that you do with K-band, and that's generally the spectrum associated with the TVs and internet access, things like that. L-band's not impacted by weather. And so that's why it's specifically used for safety, is even in the, for a lack of a better term, worst weather conditions that are out there. Um, L-band works, right? It doesn't have or suffer those same problems. So when it comes to needing always on communications, especially for drones, and this is what regulators are concerned about, is how are you managing and monitoring and communicating with this aircraft so that you understand exactly where it is, what it's doing, so on and so forth. That's the reason L-band has been so successful, is we provide that technology so that you can have that always on communications platform.
All right. And it's pretty ubiquitous how you do this, I assume, because as I'm talking to you, Jerry, and of course that introductory video had beyond visual line of sight,
Hmm.
right? That's
Sure.
still the holy grail for so many in this industry. And when you think about beyond visual line of sight, the need for solid communications from a safety standpoint and an operational standpoint is even more critical, right?
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so you're using satellites that basically, go around, orbit around the Earth to provide those communications.
Yeah, absolutely. Like anything else, you need that infrastructure, and this is where today you've got your cellular infrastructure, whether it's LTE, whether it's 5G, or even C-band in some cases. you're limited by your infrastructure. What we have in our satellites is we actually own the satellites, so we don't resell. We're not reselling services. We are actually the owner and operators of the satellites, and we provide that global service for what we're doing. And so we provide that global constellation. Currently there's some areas on the poles. So like if you're up in the Arctic, yeah, that might be a bit of a challenge. But fortunately, at least today, there's not too many people up in the Arctic that are doing stuff. But as we plan things in the future, just like any other communications provider, you try and plan for where things might need to be in the future. But today, we provide that global aspect of things. We are in the geostationary satellite platform, where there's others that are in the LEO aspects. So, I won't mention those others' names because we like to think we're better. So we're not going to mention those
Well, and I
vendors.
want to look. I'm acronym. Kind of my acronym.
Sure.
Flags are going up. LEO is low Earth orbit. GEO is geospatial.
Geostationary.
Geostationary orbit.
Sure. Yeah.
And MEO is middle Earth
Middle Earth orbit. Yeah.
orbit. And so the GEO is the highest level. Is that right? And so what kind of, from an altitude perspective, like what are we talking about there where your satellites are located?
I should actually know those altitudes.
I wrote an article about it, so I should know it too, Jerry, and I'm going off script. Let's put it this way. It's super out. I mean, it's way up there.
It is way up there. And so, one of the issues that it's always a constant marketing thing that some of our other providers to do, right? Is because for GEO, because we are in the, essentially with GEO, the satellites are moving really with the rotation of the Earth's orbit. So it's maintaining that constant footprint over a geographical area. And thank you, whoever put that mileage up there.
I did. I found I did a quick Google search because it's all of our friends, and it's about 22,000 plus miles in altitude, geosynchronous orbit. So holy shnikes, yeah. So way
yeah.
Up. All right, and the importance of this, as you say, kind of it blanket because it's geostationary, it blankets a particular area of the Earth, like that's the coverage it's going to give consistently.
It is. It's rotating with the Earth,
Yep.
to give you that constant footprint. Whereas the LEO MEOs are really they're constantly going through Earth's orbit, and they're constantly moving, and there's a handoff between the different satellites and stuff like that. So there are some things that are definitely differences in the platforms that you have. One thing's kind of unique about ours is we don't have to have as many satellites as the LEOs do to provide the same type of coverage. And that provides us a lot of benefits in some cases where we can create some redundancy between our satellites, have a lower amount of satellites, and even though we're higher up, it does create a little bit of latency between, or more latency between, transmitting from the Earth to the ground and back down. But if you do the math on this, you may have shorter latency between the ground to the Earth, unlike a LEO, for example. But LEOs have to generally transmit, retransmit that data across other satellites to get it down to where it is. And so at the end of the day, oftentimes the latency ends up being very similar, if not identical. But again, you have to really go with what works for you. And there's been lots of different instances where for our services we've been able to show how it's worked really well for the period of time, especially in aviation. We've worked really well in the oceanic space, and we're doing projects in other parts of the world, especially Europe, where we've got projects where we're now using a satellite for air traffic control within the airport domain, right? So it's no longer just about providing those services for oceanic. It's also being able to support those same types of services in the airport space. So that's worked out really well, especially as certain countries have limitations on ground infrastructure, whether it's for spectrum or for other reasons. People are starting to look more and more at this, which is why for beyond visual line of sight, it's going to be pretty important, right? You've got your again, we're not competing with a lot of the ground infrastructures. We know that operators are going to pick the best communications choice that's available to them, but obviously, ground infrastructure providers like AT&T, for example, they're only going to put infrastructure where it makes sense and they have the population density given where it is. When you start to get some of these more remote areas, you need to augment that infrastructure. And this is where, beyond visual line of sight, satellite communication comes into play. And, the bonus for us is we've been supporting aviation for quite a long time, right? So at least 30, 30 plus years. So it's worked out really well.
Well, and both on the commercial and defense side, right? So this is a
Exactly.
dual use, and that's really important. I mean, having been in the Air Force, I mean, yeah, it's almost funny to me how people are like, oh, beyond visual line of sight, when like the Air Force has been flying, Predators and Reapers, overseas, like in Southwest Asia from Creech Air Force Base for years. So, this is something that has been done. This isn't a new thing. But you guys did create a new thing. So tell us about to help with beyond visual line of sight, and
Right.
it's called Valaris. Tell
Yeah.
us about what Valaris is.
Yeah, so Valaris is the product band specifically for the, UAV and air mobility space, right? Generally, when people think of satellite, and I can tell you, I was back in, Desert Storm, and my buddy was a guy that was flying some of the early drones in the
Yep.
military, right? So Marine Corps gets pretty inventive on some of this stuff, and even back then, we're doing lots of things back then. Today we the what we've done specifically for the UAV and drone market space is we're using the same satellite infrastructure that we do for safety communications. We're making some tweaks to our ground infrastructure to better support it, but I think probably our biggest tweaks that we've done is working on our terminal platforms, right? Usually when people think of satellites, they think of big heavy antennas, they think of big terminals that have to fit on it. Now we've gotten the terminals to literally the physical size of it is literally the size of your iPhone.
Are you kidding?
And no, it's really the our multi-link terminal that does both satcom and LTE. That's our biggest terminal. I have the iPhone Pro Max, and it's about the size of my iPhone, right? Um,
Wow.
yeah, and we now have a satcom unit that's integrated with an antenna. It's take about I don't know 2 inches off of the length, make it the same diameter, but then we actually put a small form factor antenna so that the whole thing weighs less than 2 pounds. Right. And the only thing that's really required to it is it's an integrated with an antenna. It's an omnidirectional antenna, so it doesn't do steering like you do on a commercial aircraft, which is why we can, take and do that. These are more like meant to be regional type antennas, but it works out really well where it can fit on, some of the smaller drone platforms that are needed. That want that beyond visual line of sight platform, and really it sits about 7, 8 inches tall, but it's no larger than, say, I think it's like 9 inches is kind of what I, if I remember, because everything's done in metric because it's all done in UK, so trying to convert it to US is a, I still struggle with that sometimes. So but it really is a nice platform. We actually have guys that are testing now with one of our partners in Spain, testing out the performance of the new systems to make sure we can deal with all the interference issues that we have on small drones, because when you get into a compact space, you've got all those electronics, in a very small area, they kind of tend to bleed over. So we're trying to make sure we can solve some of those problems to make sure that as we go forward, we can support, the market for today to make sure that we can do that beyond visual line of sight, like the holy grail of what you're looking for. And we're hoping that, hey, as we start to integrate these platforms, all the regulators, at least from an aviation regulators perspective, already know Inmarsat, now Viasat, and they understand what we've been doing for the past 30 years for aviation and safety communication. So adding that on to other existing platforms should really help drive getting us to move forward in the beyond visual line of sight markets.
Yeah, I mean, I would think just, from a transferability standpoint, size wise, it's just an easy shift to air taxis, right? Because you're already
Yeah.
doing this in general aviation. So, from a form factor, but you shrunk this thing down, the size of an iPhone. That's amazing, Jerry. So tell me about, and I said, what did I say? Valaris. You said Valaris, tomato, tomato, Valaris. Tell us about, tell us about, so is there like an ecosystem around this? You've got the unit, with the antenna, but what else? In other words, is, say I have a business and I want to
Hmm.
do, hypothetically, on the commercial side, I want to do drone
Sure.
delivery and I want to do that beyond visual line of sight. And I want to make sure that I have a SATCOM option for my drones in
Mhm.
that route. What do I need and how do I get it?
So today, what we're doing is we're building that ecosystem that you're talking about. We're partnering with several partners to really provide that holistic solution. One of the things that we're learning as we're working with different aspects of the market, these are ones that are like, say, future air taxis, whether it's autonomous, some are starting out piloted, and then we'll move to autonomous as regulation goes. What we're trying to do is work with them to really create that ecosystem. So, for example, um, we will work with people to say, okay, look, do you have other communications partners that you're working with? We can work together with them, or in some cases, we can just set them up so they're the main interface to kind of do this. And we're working with a couple different partners to provide that rounded, that complete solution. So in other words, do you have the tools in place that allow you to do your safety assessment, whether you're doing SORA, whether you're doing SMS, or whatever the case is? What does that look like? What are the regulators going to look for? How do you monitor this through a line of sight perspective, or through just your whole communications platforms? What are they? So we're working with partners like, for example, Diamontor is a partner that we're working with to kind of integrate some of their products, that we can provide those as solutions to customers, so that they don't everybody doesn't have to go out and buy their own, or we can do it as kind of a group partnership kind of thing. We're working with a couple other partners to try and integrate our multi-link platform that allows customers to use different types of technologies to manage their data, to understand what that looks like. So,
And by the way,
um,
Jerry, we popped up this image because I know you Avionics is one of your partners in this respect.
yeah.
Doing so much in both crewed, uncrewed aviation, and you guys, how are you working with them?
So we actually work with Avionics. We work also with a company called Elsight, and then a couple of others. And basically, what we're doing with them is we're trying to work with them to say, okay, how do we integrate our hardware platform to create that multi-link environment? And then what are the management tools that we have in place that allows the end users to actually monitor and do their stuff? And so, Avionics has a platform, Elsight has a platform. We have a couple other, partners out there that we're not ready to necessarily disclose yet, but
Right.
partners that we can do. And for us, like we try to stay, for lack of a better term, we're kind of Switzerland. We try to stay agnostic, because for us, at the end of the day, we recognize that we will be probably integrated with multiple systems, and it's easier for us to just be agnostic in that aspect and just kind of go from there. But it works out well for us, quite frankly, because in some cases we know that sometimes you want to keep the platform separate and versus fully integrated. Maybe just to integrate your management platforms versus the hardware, just to allow for the redundancy, common failures like power failures, whatever the case is. And kind of works from there. So we were pretty well with most of the partners that we have been working with.
And so we were talking kind of about aviation partners,
Mm.
command and control partners, like we've had, by the way, UAvionics sponsored last month, which was
Sure,
dedicated to complex operations. And
sure.
we've had Elsight on the show a couple times. You have Amitai, the CEO, and the
Yeah,
Halo platform that they provide. But you also
yeah.
work with OEMs like X-Wing and Reliable Robotics, among others. So, right, I mean, when we talk about this ecosystem, your net is pretty broad in terms of the partners you're looking to collaborate with. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I think you have to be. I mean, you have. I know that people are financial folks in the organization. They get really frustrated because it's like, look, who's our partners? Who's doing what? They want everything in a nice box, and unfortunately, uh, the good and the bad part of having a new aviation ecosystem is we literally have to create this ecosystem. None of this exists today, right? So we're working with old partners, we're working with new partners, and we're trying to create that stream that works out really well. You're right. We work with both Reliable Robotics and X-Wing. And obviously with that, we've got to keep a lot of fine lines or barriers between different conversations and stuff like that. But it's been great for us because we've been able to learn from all of our different partners, whether it's an OEM or whether it's another manufacturer, whatever the case is. And it's helping us really drive what our future product line is we're adapting to the needs of the customer. And we can do that with a lot of flexibility right now because it is a new product line. So we've got the flexibility, or our company's been really supportive in getting us to work with how do we create this future market space and to make sure that we're doing and meeting the customer's needs. And that's what a lot of what we're focused on is really that. And for us, that's why it is so broad, is we want to make sure we understand what the customers are doing. We want to make sure we understand what our other partners, other manufacturers are doing. We want to make sure that we're capturing this as best as possible as we start to drive what are our products for the market space.
Well, amongst your other partners, you recently added VideoSoft Global to your partner network. Tell us, what they do and why that's important to the industry.
So VideoSoft is actually one of our is a partner as well, and what they've been doing is in the platform where we have an added processor. So that's the bigger platform that we have. We essentially allow them to put their software and integrate it into our hardware. And what that does, and I think at AVUSI they did a really good demonstration out there where they can actually select the bandwidth based on the best link available, select the bandwidth and be able to provide the video coding to provide pretty decent video. And for a lot of the smaller drones, especially like inspection drones and stuff like that, video is important to them, right? Is they want to, they're sending drones out there, they're doing inspections. A picture's nice, but sometimes, a moving picture is really, a lot better picture in
Yeah,
telling the
like search
story.
and rescue. I think that's
Yeah.
another, relevant use
ex-
case.
ex- it really is. And so they've been able to adapt and test out their platform on our BGA network to make sure that it's working well. They've been able to demonstrate that, and it's been pretty impressive the kind of results that they've been able to produce with that. It's especially for the processor. We have an added processor. It's not our standard satellite platform processor that we have on this extended platform, and it was specifically built so that we could take and add additional software applications as it's practical. And obviously it's going to be dependent on what other partners that we're working with, whether it's with Elsight and others, where how much room is on that processor and stuff like that. But this is where we get to the point of how do we tailor a solution to meet a customer's needs, and that's really what we're trying to get to, is making sure we have that understanding, and video soft worked really well in some of that.
That's awesome. So how does UAS traffic management, as this kind of future ecosystem in and of itself, how does Viasat fit, you think, into the UTM like framework and ConOps that we have here in the US and of course in Europe with USpace?
Sure. Well, I think it really, to be honest with you, I think it's going to be the same or close to the same in both market spaces. I don't think it's going to matter. I think in some cases, Europe has predefined the regulations a little bit better than the US. I think we'll actually,
Yes, I would agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I hate to say that,
I
but
know, I know.
yeah, but like I said, there's plus and minuses to both. But where we fit into that is this is part of the work that we're doing with our partners, right? So we've got Viator, we have Elsight or UAVX or others. One of the things we absolutely know together is we've got to be able to take data and provide that data to a UTM integrator, right? So like another partner that we have, we've got Andra, we have Frequentis, we have other partners where their whole business market is in those spaces, right? Is
Yep, yep.
their customers are the regulator, whether it's the FAA or one of the regional, ANSPs in Europe, and the customer, to be able to exchange flight plan information and be able to provide that confidence that they have the right data, and it's data that can be trusted, right? And this is the security part of things. It's trusted data so that they can allow the regulator to make informed choices of this is why you should approve this flight plan, right? There's no known conflicts. We've got some real-time analysis of tracking data, whether they're getting it from the carriers like ourselves or other partners, or whether they're getting it from the radar feeds directly to kind of overlay what is that real-time data based on known data, based on forecast. What does that look like from an airspace environment to make sure they're doing that deconfliction between commercial aviation, general aviation, and what we're doing from a air taxi, air mobility environment. And so those are some of the products that we're working on. Data, I think, is going to be king as we start to move forward. Not just about the communications link itself; it's the data, right? And data really is going to be king. One thing kudos to the European government versus the U.S. They put out regulations where it's actually mandatory for communications providers to provide this information. So if you're an AT&T, if you're an Viasat, if you're going to support this market space, there's certain types of data you have to provide. For us, there's a organization called ACGA. And I can tell you the acronym, but it's easier just as explaining is it's people from the drone industry, people from the telecom industry like GSMA, who are who are working together to help develop what these future standards will look like to support these requirements. So ACGA has worked pretty close with the different communities, and it's all the same players. Right, you've got, I have to give Thomas from Tour a lot of credit because he's been leading some of these efforts around creating these common standards for information exchange. Our team is part of that, and other organizations are part of that, so that we can standardize how we do this data exchange. And I think that's probably the most confusing thing for people is, today when you look at what's critical in the communications aspect, what's critical is not the communications between the aircraft and the pilot or and the controller in this particular instance. The critical communications is between the ground system that's managing the aircraft. That's critical communications, but the
Yeah.
data is still considered critical, that we need to be able to pass that to the UTM integrators for the whatever the local ANSP is. So that data is something that's new. It's not something people are used to, but that now becomes critical safety data that is needed to be able to make informed decisions, whether it's real time or near real time. And so those are, I think, some of the challenges that we do kind of face in the future. But I know that there's been a lot of work. People are foreseeing that. There's standards being developed on a common API that can be leveraged so that, it's not, not every provider is coming up with their own API. That just makes life harder for everybody. It's creating a common API so that we can exchange that information and make sure we get the right relevant information. And so it's been, like I said, creating this new market space, this new ecosystems does come with challenges, but these are all positive things to me. This is like we're creating opportunities for a whole world here.
Well, and the person you've been talking about, for everybody out there, if you don't know him, Thomas Neubauer from Dimeter, that Jerry, you've been referencing. I did an article about some of the standards you're speaking of that he helped create with Gutma, I believe, in this UTM space. And so for those not familiar with this stuff, I mean, I really commend to your attention, like, read the UTM CONOPS the FAA has put out, read the use space regulation. And there's a lot of similarities in terms of this data that Jerry's talking about that's going to be so critical, and a lot of different stakeholders, right? In terms of not just the pilots or the operators of the vehicles, but the folks that are kind of this hub of the data and then passing it out. And then also, what are the other sensors out there, whether it's weather and other things.
Right.
So that's super complex what we're doing here. But Jerry, what I love about what you're doing at Viasat and where you've come from, and of course Inmarsat, the whole combination is that you've got this history in general aviation and on the commercial side, but also on the military side that you're bringing forward. So again, while this is new, there's a lot of similarities to things that have been done before, and this is all doable. Speaking of military, you guys just recently, you're working like with Northrop Grumman or something for my service. I know you said you're a Marine, the United States Air Force, this Global Lightning program.
I'm sorry, did you say Chair Force?
Oh, ha, 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 ha. I had, when I was at CENTCOM, there was this sergeant major, Army sergeant major. He'd always be like, he'd see me in the hallway, and at this point, by the way, I'm a colonel, right? He's a sergeant major.
Yeah.
And he's just like, hey, Air Force, he's like, thanks for giving us a lift to the fight. And I'm just like, you know. So I know we always get abused in the Joint Force, but you know, you only hate us because you really love us and you couldn't survive without us. So there is that. Um, but
We'll call it a love hate thing. There you go.
there you go. There you go. And so you're working on this, and I love the names. You know, the military always comes up with the fun stuff like Global Lightning. You know, what's this thing you're doing with the Air Force, kind of bringing this military heritage that you already have forward to today?
So that's not one I think I can talk about. So
Oh,
that's
dang
one
it.
I'm going to kind
Okay.
of, yeah.
All
Sorry
right.
about
Well,
that
oh,
one.
you
That's not
tell
one I.
us.
Yeah.
You tell us, but you'd have to kill us. Well, I'll tell you. Well, all right. So just so Jerry doesn't have to say it, what is
Mhm.
publicly available is there is a Viasat 3 satellite communications network that is working with aircraft, U.S. Air Force vehicles. We'll leave it at that. Okay,
Yeah.
moving on. We won't talk any
Mhm.
further about that. But let's talk about business aviation because that's a fun crowd. Last year, I went to the uh, NBAA, National Business Aviation Association's Business Aviation Conference and Expo. Talk about a mouthful, BACE. They're
Yes.
going to be in Vegas again this year in mid-October, taking over the city. And you guys are working in the charter aviation arena. So what are you doing there? Because when I think about charter aircraft and the business aviation crowd, it really, to me, lends itself to this, you know, advanced air mobility crowd and these eVTOL aircraft. You know,
Yeah.
we even had some there. Whisk was there. Over Air was there.
Yep.
A handful of folks. So, what are you doing with the business aviation folks?
Yeah. So we were actually there last year, actually with Supernal, and so we kind of demonstrated.
Ah,
Yeah. So I'm not
yeah,
sure if
at MBAA because I remember what's the face, the German company. God, my brain isn't working. Not Lilium. They've got the Velocity Volocopter was there
a
doing flight.
Volcopter.
Volocopter was actually doing flights at the Henderson Airport. It was super cool.
Uh, yeah. So I don't know. I'll have to defer to America on this one, but maybe I've been to so many
I
conferences
think
in
you're thinking
Vegas.
of
Yeah.
CES.
Yep. There you go. Maybe that's what it was. It's
Yeah,
CES.
you're
Yes.
thinking of
Yeah.
CES.
Yeah. Okay.
Colonel had their big reveal of their SA-2
Yeah.
aircraft
Yeah.
in a giant hangar. Yeah, it was CES.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
I was there
America's
too.
here keeping yeah, America's here keeping me honest. He just yeah, it's CES. So
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I did get that wrong. But for us in the commercial aircraft, and I think for the business aircraft, I apologize.
yeah.
There's a lot of things actually going on for sure. So I know for us, um, and I guess to put some context to it, the UAV market space in the past couple of years has really lent itself to a new way of doing business and aviation from a communications perspective, right? One of the things that we're doing specific, in UAVs is it's no longer about just safety spectrum, right? It's more about how do we take the combined communications capabilities and be able to come to a more performance-based standard versus more of a regulated space standard, which really limits or constrains what your technical solutions can be. Even in commercial aviation, there's a new concept that was put out by both Airbus, Boeing, and EASA and FA around this concept called hyperconnectivity, where it's around how can we actually get combined communications and focus more on the performance versus the regulations around the technology itself and really focus on performance and security, right? How do we also make sure it's safe, secure, and so on and so forth? And so, with those combined concepts, business aviation is actually kind of a great market for that because the aircraft are much smaller.
Yeah. And ironically, we lose our communications as we're talking about comms. So too funny. But we were talking about the business aviation
But
crowd.
also,
There you go. Okay, he's
exactly.
back. He's back. All
Yeah.
right. So you're saying the aircraft are smaller and it kind of lends itself to this kind of combined communication.
Yeah, so the combined communications, right, is in the business market, unlike commercial aviation where the aircraft are bigger, right, where you've got more volume of people to get that higher demand, business communication communications, they want they're kind of that blend between how can I take the concepts in the drones where they're taking all the communications, not those that have just been certified in a regulatory space, but the combined communications, and getting that to fit within these business jet platforms is kind of a big deal right now. I know for us, we're putting together solutions where we're bonding multiple L-band channels to give the broader bandwidth that that provide that broadband service to still allow for not just safety communications that are used for pilot controller, but also for the needs of passengers that are on the aircraft and stuff like that. In addition to the broadband internet solutions like K-band that are used for those kinds of things there. So it's coming up. Our partners, our customers, and us, we're working together to come up with what are those how can we better serve that market space as both the regulatory environment and the technologies themselves are changing or can be used differently. And so it's leading to some very innovative ways of how we implement this across our different aviation platforms, and quite honestly, in some of our other platforms, right? I think one of the things that we have for like the smaller terminal platforms that we have is, as we're doing this for aviation, as we're doing this for UAV platforms, is well, wait a minute, if I can do this in aviation, how could I take that same platform and put it and use it in something like agriculture or some of these other platforms where, I can create, cheaper platforms if I don't do the aviation certification, if I don't do, some of these other things, how can we create these other market spaces that works? And so it's to me, it's quite an exciting time because there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of change going on. And to me, I like change to kind of see where we can kind of lead the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And and you've alluded to it, but just to kind of foot stomp, we're talking really multi-domain, because you mentioned
Yeah,
maritime. Of course, there's ground vehicles that need these communications as well, whether on the commercial
sure.
or the military side, right? So you talk about CES, we had the giant tractor there, right, from John
Yeah.
Deere that's like all autonomous. And so
Hmm.
when you think about that interconnectivity, the multimodal, all of it, you guys are, you're in a perfect position, I think, to help advance where we are in the world of autonomy, and hence the dawn of
Yep.
autonomy. Why you're on this show and why you selected Global Leaders Month to sponsor. So wanted to thank you, Jerry, again for doing that, and it's been really eye-opening. All the things you're doing, all the things we can look forward to. We've got about a minute left. So what I want to do is cede the floor to you to kind of give some concluding remarks, and certainly remember to tell us like where we can find you next, maybe in person, and also how people can learn more about Viasat and reach you.
Sure. So I think what you're going to find with Viasat is our biggest problem today is education, getting people educated to understand, hey, uh, satellite doesn't have to be that big dish in your backyard. It doesn't have to be, some of these other things. The technology has improved, technology can change, and
This
just
size,
like your
this size. Yep.
exactly, right? So if we can get it down to that size, now it's a matter of, how do we work solutions and integrate them into your platform. Getting a hold of us is actually pretty easy. You can go to the Viasat website, or I think I've published my email out there as well. But it's just, jerry.hancock at mrsat.com or jerry.hancock at viasat.com. So whether you have my old email or new email, I get them either way. Um, and for us, the biggest thing for us is just as we start to go to this market, reach out to us. We have been pretty flexible with working with different partners, directly with OEMs, different manufacturers, and stuff like that, to come up with some really creative ideas. And what's exciting for me in this industry is everybody's got some really creative ideas. It's like, we haven't thought about that. Let's think about this for a minute and see how we can do that. So there's always a way to do something. We just have to figure out, whether or not that really makes sense or not. And then I think as far as the next show that I'm going is, I think for the month of July, I just kind of wrote that off for the month. I'm going to be on the road for the next month, I think. But I'll be up in Baltimore, or not Baltimore. I'll be up in Seattle next week with our friends in Boeing. I'll be in UK for 2 weeks after that. So Farnborough, I think is, I'm missing
Oh,
Oshkosh.
cool.
Yeah.
I hope to get there next year. I'm not making it this year. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of Oshkosh. I'm extremely disappointed I'm not making it again. This will be the second year in a row have not made it, so I'm incredibly disappointed on that one. But I'm going to Farnsboro, so we'll see what that's like. And then I'll be at the FAA conference that they're having at the end of the month in July as well. So I'll be in Baltimore for
I'll
that.
see you there.
Yeah, so I'll see you there as well. I think Mark Ganung is also going to be there as well. I talked to him earlier in the week, and so I
Good,
think he'll be
good.
there as well. Yeah, Nevada's rocking these days.
Yep.
So yeah, as we do this, just reach out to us. I mean, you've got Merrick Rakowski, who's also on here as well. And honestly, he's the one that keeps me straight. I'm not sure, what he did in a previous life to get stuck with me, but
I know, but
we seem
God,
to be
I'm
doing
just
this work.
saying, God bless him.
Yeah, he rocks. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's all good.
Yep.
Uh,
All right, very
hey,
good. Well, once again, Jerry, thank you so much. And it was a great show. Learned so much. And everybody, check out Viasat Global Leaders. Look them up online and grab Jerry when you see him in person at any one of these shows. And I know you're also going to Commercial UAV in September. In
yep.
fact, that's where I met Jerry and Mark last year for the first time. So it's been super fun this year working together. That's all she wrote, everybody. Thank you so much for your attention. We are out here.